So right now, I'm going to head over to Paul Hannaby, and he is with us from the United Kingdom. And I got to spotlight him up right now. Paul, you with? Yes, sir. You're with us. Good evening.
I am. How are you?
Hi, Paul.
All right, folks. Here's the deal. If I mute all, then nobody can talk. So, but if you want to talk with Paul, we can do it during the demonstration. But if you have company around, mute yourself so we don't hear everything else. And I just heard Johnny Hughes just send something in. He's got a drawing for the train whistle. If he's got a drawing for it, our master webmaster is going to be putting it up on our site for us. That's where he's going to send it to Dave. Paul, you with us again, sir? I'm sorry I interrupted you. Go ahead.
That's all right, no problem. Yes, I'm here.
What do we have tonight?
We're going to do a threaded box. Well, that's the plan. So a couple of examples to start with. Here we go. This was just a rough sort of beginning of the piece of wood with the threads cut. So this is a piece of boxwood. So that's sort of doing the inside's done, and then you can turn the outside of the box. So that's where we'd start. There's one here. This one I do sometimes for demos, and you've got a thread there, and inside here you've got a series of bobbins and a hole in the end. So that's the needle case. You put your needles in the end, and you can wind your threads on the bobbins there, and it's effectively a traveling needle case. That one came from a Roman design, but they didn't thread them, but they would have been a push fit, but it's just an evolution of that. There's one here that's a little spinning top, and take the top off, so sort of Bonnie Klein style spinning top there.
Wow.
Again in boxwood.
You thread it. You threaded that top, correct? You threaded out that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this one, which is a bit rough, but I just want to show the inside of it really. These are pewter inserts that I've cast myself and then turn and thread in the same way as I would a piece of wood. The outside of that's yet to be turned, obviously, but that's something else you can do with threading. You can sort of extend that idea and actually make threaded inserts out of plastic or even out of resin, or in that case out of pewter. But the advantage of being able to thread an insert is if you've got a wood that's a bit soft and isn't going to take a thread very well, you can put an insert in that would take a thread. So you can extend what you can do with threaded boxes. And there's a little one here which is unfinished. This one's a piece of striped ebony, and again that's threaded as a little box, but as I say, unfinished. It's still got a little bit of a lug at each end where it was held between center, so I need to turn that and put some finish on it. That's just unfinished at the moment. But there are a few examples there. But the basic tools are these. You need a pair of thread chasers, and they usually come in pairs. I say usually. There is what they call a unit chaser that Ashley R's make that looks a bit like that, and it's usable at both ways round. So you only get one rather than a pair. But the conventional set, if you like, is this. You get one that's got the teeth on the end, and one that's got the teeth on the side. And the one with the teeth on the end you use to do the external thread. The one with the teeth on the side you get to use on the internal thread. And the third tool in the set is this one. You see that L-shaped cutter on the side? It actually, the cutting edge is on the edge of that L where I've got my finger. And that's for recessing the internal thread. I'll explain that when we come to it. But I just wanted to show you what you get as a set of tools. Before you can use your thread chasing tools, they need a little bit of fettling. So modify them slightly. These are generally just made out of a rectangular bar with the teeth cut on the end. This one, the edges have been rounded. So if you're sliding that across your tool rest, which is what you do with these, then those rounded edges make it slide better. I'll put that under the close-up camera here. So that's the underside. So let me get that in place. You see the corners there are round rather than a hard square corner. So that's been rounded off on the bottom two corners, so it's going to slide smoothly across the rest. The other thing with this is you see on the end, if I show you the side view of that, it looks like it's got a bevel on the top. The reason for that is the way I sharpen them. I'll go back to the front camera there. The bevel on the top there is because when I sharpen them with a little hone, just a flat hone. This one's a diamond hone, but any flat hone will do. And instead of holding the hone flat on the top of the tool, and you're effectively taking metal off all of the top of the tool, I just angle it. So it's at a few degrees. I don't know what angle, but 5-10 degrees, whatever. You can see there the angle on the side, and I then hone it at that angle. So I'm just sharpening the tops of the teeth, nothing else. That's all you do. You sharpen the tops of the teeth, and over time that's developed that bevel because it's been used. So I've probably got halfway through the thickness of that. And on the tool with the teeth, this one with the teeth on the side, same principle. Instead of having the hone flat, I just angle it slightly and then hone the teeth on the edge.
You're only using those teeth. You're not using the whole top. So that's the part you need to sharpen.
Exactly. Yeah. As long as you've got the teeth sharp, it will do the job. So that's the basic sort of tools. These come in different pitches. The one I just showed you, let's go back to that. That's a 16 teeth per inch thread chaser. So that's most people say for an average sort of reasonably dense wood, a 16 or 18 is a good place to start. You can go a bit each side of that. I'll show you another one here alongside it. That one's a 10. So you see the difference between the 16 and the 10. It's a lot coarser. You've got a deeper thread. So that might work better on a slightly softer wood. I've got between about 3 teeth per inch and 40. So to be honest, I don't use the ones at the extremes. That I just got them as a job lot once. The 40 teeth per inch, probably too fine for wood. You might use those on bone, ivory, or brass or something like that, but probably too fine for wood. You might go probably the extreme with a hardwood like boxwood is maybe 32 teeth per inch or something like that. But yeah, generally 16 to 18 is where you want to be. So that's just a quick intro. If we switch to the lathe now, look at that. I've got a tool rest here, and this is the other thing you need to get right before you start chasing threads. This one, there's a few little dinks and dents, and you can see here where I've got my finger. There's a couple of marks there where the parting tool or something has put slight marks in it. So what I would do every now and again is get a flat file, run it across the top of the rest like this, and flatten out the top of the rest. This one's a moderately coarse file, so I do the coarse file, then a fine one, and then probably finish it with maybe a 180 grit or something like that. You don't need to polish it, but I want it smooth, and this has got just a couple of little dinks in it that I would like gone before I used it for thread chasing. As it happens in this case, I've just got a different tool rest. This one's a standard cast tool rest, so I'm going to switch to this one, which is a hardened steel top. So that one should be smooth and not have any little marks in it, because that's as hard as the tools I'm putting on it. So that should be fine without me having to do anything. So first thing I do is just get a scrap piece of wood and just show you the principle of cutting the thread for those of you that haven't done it. I know there's some that have, but you have to bear with me. So I've got a piece of boxwood here. It's if you want to practice this, I'd suggest getting a dense piece of wood to start with. So that's a good choice. Set up my tool rest, and I just want to square that off. Make sure it's running true. So I just want to make this pretty much a parallel cylinder initially, and then on that corner just round it off, and that's ready to start a thread. And then when I actually cut the thread, I want to bring my speed back down to about 400, 500 RPM, somewhere in that ballpark. Just stop the lathe there. The reason for riding that corner over is when I want to cut my thread. I think I've just lost one of my thread chasing tools. Oh no, there it is. To strike the thread, as they call it, I want to do it on the corner. And if you've got a sharp corner there, that corner digs in between two of the teeth, and your tool doesn't move. So you remove the corner, so this tool will move across that radius corner instead of just digging in on the edge. Take the tool rest farther back than you would normally, because what you want to do is go across and back. So you're using your tool in effectively a circular motion, and you need a little bit more space between the wood and the tool rest to allow that to happen. So about an inch, give or take. That's probably a good sort of distance. Treat this like you would any scraper. You want to be cutting pretty much on center line, or just below, and with the edge trailing slightly, so it doesn't sort of dig in or work in a sort of grabby sort of fashion. So I'll start the lathe at just under 500 RPM. And I've got the tool at about 45 degrees, and I'm just going to touch the wood and pull the tool to my left towards the headstock to try and start that thread. And once the thread is struck, as they call it, you put the tool this against the wood, and you see it tracks itself now, because it's following the groove that's been cut. The spiral is there, and the tool will now follow it. So couple of passes, all three should get that, and then I keep doing more at the same point, and then as that gets a bit deeper and more defined, I start to bring my tool around. Eventually I want to end up here at 90 degrees, so I'm cutting a straight thread down that cylinder, but I start off on that corner, and with each pass I bring the handle around a little bit further, and you see that thread starts to propagate down the cylinder.
Paul, in a little bit, will you give us an end shot of that scraper on the thread chaser, showing us from the tip looking to the handle? So because folks aren't understanding why. You see that those grooves are on angles. They're not 90 degrees to the ball.
Let me put it on the other camera. Hang on. You can hopefully see there that you've got teeth.
But they're not ground 90 degrees to the flat. They're ground on the angle of the pitch. So that makes it automatically walk across the piece.
Yeah, they're ground at a slight slope, if you look at it end on. If I bring that camera up, I'll probably show you.
That's the same reason your skew skates when you present it slightly off center.
Yeah.
It's difficult to make out with it. Let me get the coarser one. It's probably more obvious with the coarser one. That one's a 10 teeth per inch. You can see that there's only about 5 teeth across there.
Yeah. And
I'm not quite sure how well it shows up, but
I've ran across turners that tried to make them, and they made them 90 degrees, and they won't walk.
No, they don't. uni chaser that Ashley R's make is a straight one because you use it both ways up, one for external, one for internal. And it doesn't walk in the way that you're sort of describing there, but it will work. Because with these, I've actually used them to cut a left-hand thread, even though they've got that right-hand bias on them. On the end here, they've got that angle. If you just trail them, so the actual depth of the teeth aren't really making much contact, you can actually make it go the other way. You just run the tool from left to right instead of right to left. But you see there the thread's starting to form. It's not fully formed yet, but if I carry on, do a few more passes.
Now, you're not pushing in on this, are you? You're just kind of letting
I'm
it.
just putting a little bit of pressure on it just to speed up the cut, but I'm letting it take its own sort of path to the side. You don't want to be pushing it sideways, but I'm just putting a little bit of force inwards just to take a slightly bigger cut, just to speed the process up, really. But there's an almost fully formed thread now. So that's the principle of it anyway. Where you've got a shoulder, let me just get rid of that. Just speed that up a bit. So if I do one with a shoulder, a bit like the one on the end there. This will probably explain why you need that recess tool. So now we're turning up to that shoulder. We're forming a thread up to that shoulder. So when the thread tracing tool reaches that shoulder, you need to extract it before it hits the shoulder. Because if the tool stops, it tears the thread off, or at least it's going to damage it. So we need to be able to form a fully formed thread up to the end of the thread, really. Otherwise, it might not work properly with the other half of the thread. So the way we achieve that is to use a narrow parting tool and just cut a recess in there that's as deep as the thread. In this case, 16 teeth per inch thread tracers, you want a recess that's going to be maybe a 1/16 of an inch deep, thereabouts. So I'm just radiusing that corner so we can go in there again. Bring my speed back down 400, 450-ish. And then again, we strike the thread on the corner. I'm just going to slow that down a little bit. And once that thread strikes, you can feel it start to pull itself like that. So I start to bring my thread chaser around. And here I'm working up to a shoulder. So I've got to extract the tool before I hit the shoulder. So now it's a little bit more difficult because of that shoulder. So I'm running up to it. And if I feel that's running too fast, I can drop the speed down and do it at my own pace. So don't feel you have to do it at any particular speed. Do it at a speed you're comfortable with. So if you feel that the tool's running away with you, just slow it down. You've got variable speed, then that's a sort of an option you've got there. This one's not working quite how it's supposed to, but I think I've got a. Well, that's it. Got it now. So running up to that shoulder. It's essential to see that at that point there, I need to withdraw the tool from the thread before it hits the shoulder. And the shorter that thread is, the less time you've got from the point where you engage the tool to the point where you reach the shoulder and have to withdraw it. So it becomes a little bit more tricky to do short thread. So what I would normally do is make a longer thread. Get this. It's getting there. It's got a taper on it there. I can square that off if I need to, but just while we've got that tapered thread there, one point to bear in mind is sometimes it's useful to make a tapered thread, and you can just put them together and do half a turn, and it locks on. So they have their uses. Usually you would try and do this and make a straight thread, but there we've got a tapered one. But I just wanted to demonstrate the actual sort of principle of how that's formed, and how you're working up to the shoulder there. One other thing to bear in mind, if you run that tool too fast, you can get what they call a two-start thread. So if I put my pencil in that groove, let me find a start, it's about there, and turn the piece of wood, I should, if that's correct, I should have a pencil mark on every groove. Here I haven't. I've got a pencil mark there, then nothing, then a pencil mark. So I've got a two-start thread there. So I was actually moving the tool too fast for the speed I was turning the lathe.
That's it.
This one here, hopefully, I'll put my pencil in that one. Oh yeah, that's a left-hand thread on there. But you can see there, I've put pencil on every single groove. That's a one-start thread. So bear in mind that if you get your synchronization wrong, you can make a two-start thread or even a three-start thread. Fine if you make them both the same, but that's not usually what you want to do. So it's just one to watch out for. So what I would do is, if that wasn't what I wanted, I'd take it off and then adjust the speed of the lathe or the speed of me moving the tool. I was moving effectively at double the speed I should have been for the rotational speed of the lathe. That's why I've ended up with a two-start pitch there. I think this first one up here, what's left of it, if I run the pencil around there, then that one is also a two-start. So that just shows you that it is possible to get these wrong if you run the tool too fast. But anyway, that's
Paul, can that be corrected, or do you have to take the threads off and restart?
You've got to take it off. You need to turn the thread away and recut it.
Okay.
There isn't really a fix for it unless you can make the female thread to match. As long as you've got two matching threads, they'll work. But you need to replicate that on both, if you see what I mean. So
but the double thread will just mean it screws on quicker and you have less, it'll just screw onto your box quicker. So it's actually maybe a good thing.
I mean, it's not necessarily wrong, but if you're aware of it, then you can use it to your advantage. That was sort of part of the purpose of that. If you look at pen kits, for those of you that you turn pens, if you look at the pen kits, most pens where you've got a screw-on cap will have a 3 or a 4 start thread. And again, it's done exactly as Matt said, to turn it on faster. You want to screw on your cap onto your pen without lots of twists to do it. You just want to put it on, twist, and it's done. So they have a 3 or a 4 start thread on the pen cap. So that's what happens. Half a turn and it's done pretty much. So yeah, there are times when it is used for that purpose, and if you know how to do it, then you can make it yourself and make it to your advantage.
Paul, when you're doing an internal and external thread, which one do you want to do first?
I normally favor doing the internal thread first. You can do it either way, and I have done them both ways, but if you give me a choice, I would do the internal thread first, and then I think it's the reason I would do it that way is because it's easier to size the spigot and then turn the external thread to match it. So no other reason other than that, but you can do it either way. But yeah, that's what I would do. And also, while we're talking about threads, internals and externals, there's a choice about which thread you put on which half. Like with boxes, would you put the spigot on the lid or on the base? Here I've got the internal thread in the base because I just think it looks neater Whereas if you look at the lid, you've got the spigot sticking out and the thread on it. So that you normally pick it up and put it aside, and your focus is on that piece. So I think it just looks neat to put in the internal thread on the base of the box. And if that was a push fit box, that would be as it is, and the spigot would be on the lid. But yeah, again, you can do it either way, and there's no right or wrong here. It's what you think works. But I've got a piece of wood here. This is a piece of king wood. So I'll make a box out of that. So I'm going to put that on the lathe.
And are you cutting pewter exactly the same way as you did the wood for threading?
Sorry,
Are you threading the pewter? Are you threading the pewter exactly the same way? Thread chasing it just like you did that wood?
Absolutely, yeah, exactly the same tools. Yeah, the pewter is soft enough that whatever tools you use for turning wood, you can use for turning pewter. And I cut the threads with the thread chasers in exactly the same way. I have got a threading jig that I bought last year, but I've been doing it for nearly 20 years without one, so I don't need that. But I thought, yeah, it was on special offer, and I thought, yeah, why not? So I bought one. But how much I'll use it, I don't know. But I'll start off with this piece of wood between centers. I've got the grain running along there, so I'm treating this as a spindle. You can see on the end grain there, this is from probably quite a large tree, and the growth rings are relatively flat. So hopefully that will be a relatively stable piece of wood.
For members interested, Kim has put up some email or some website addresses for the hollowing tools. Amazon, robertsorby.com, and a few others. You can appreciate that input. And if you look at the kits from Sorby, one of the kits has got an adjustable gauge that you can determine the inside thread and outside thread using. If you set one, you can set the other using the gauge.
Yeah, that's right. There's a sizing gauge. I wouldn't say it's 100% foolproof. I've used that before.
No, I'm the fool that can't make it work.
But they get it certainly gets you very close. So it might just take a little bit of a tweak. But so yeah, it's not bad. Gets you pretty close to where you need to be. Right, we'll stick with the overhead one, I think. Right, so I just want to turn this down to a cylinder initially. So I'm just going to turn the corners off it.
Could you go camera left a little bit?
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay.
Much better, sir. Thank you.
All right, we'll go with that. So when you start with a spindle roughing gouge, start on the wood and cut towards the corner rather than starting on the corner and cutting in, because that way you won't chip the corners off. You see that gap's opening up quite a bit between the rest and the wood, so I'm just going to move the rest in. A little bit more to go. I'm not too worried if there might be the odd bit of a flat there, because I think what I'm going to do is put this in a chuck, and 9 times out of 10 you put a piece of wood in the chuck and it runs off a bit anyway, so I'd have to true it up. So at that point I would remove any remaining flat. So I put my parting tool on the end. I just want to create a spigot. I've set my dividers here, my calipers, to the size of the spigot I want to create, and they've got nice rounded tips, so I can run that against the wood with the lathe running. until I get to the size I want. Nearly there. I'm using a set of 1.5 inch jaws. That's about it. So create the spigot, same the other end. I'll need to dovetail that, but I'll do that in a second. And I'll also need to check the length of these spigots. The jaws I'm using are the O'Donnell jaws, and they're very shallow jaws. They've only got about a 5mm depth on the jaw. So I've got to cut my spigot fairly accurately to 4mm or so. Because I want my spigot shorter than the depth of the jaw. That's about it. Let's just square that off. So that's my dovetails, or my spigots cut. I just want to get a ruler and, as you said, check the length of those, because these jaws are, I keep headbutting the camera with my visor, sorry about that. Yeah, that's pretty much 4mm this end. It's, we get the ruler in, so there's a bit of guesswork there. I think that's slightly too long. Just clean up the ends. And then to create the dovetail, I'm just going to use a spindle gauge and come in on the edge of the spigot, cut in. Likewise on the other end.
We told y'all we'd have an interpreter come in, and our interpreter wants you all know.
Yeah. Yeah, I tend to work in inches on big numbers and millimeters on small numbers.
Well, you know, we don't want somebody to be confused because you're speaking English.
So that's my, you see it's got a bit of a flat there, but as I said, I'm not too worried about that. I just want to figure out which end of this is going to be the top, which is going to be the bottom. It all looks pretty good, to be honest. I'll make this side the top, and then it's where am I going to split that? So I need to allow, let's say the top's going to have the external thread. So I need enough length for the lid plus the thread. So, but that old rule of thumb of cutting it into thirds, 1/3, 2/3, or if you want to go down the technical route, this golden ratio. 2 tips for you. One is white pencils. If you've got a dark piece of wood, white pencils are brilliant. So I can make that line, and with a white pencil, it's just so much easier to see. And here, another one for you, a golden ratio ruler. So I can measure the whole length of it, and I've got 2 different sets of numbers, so I can work out how much of it to actually split. So if I say that's a 3-inch blank, then dividing it by the golden ratio, that becomes just under 2, sort of 1.9. So I could go for 2/3, 1/3, and work it out with this. But I mean, I just normally eyeball it. But anyway, if you want to do it the technical way, then do it with that. But somewhere between those 2 lines, I think, is where I want to be for my parting cut to separate the 2 halves. So it is about, give or take, 2/3, 1/3. So I'll part that with a narrow parting tool. I've got one of these. It's about 2mm or just over 1/16 of an inch width. So I don't waste too much wood. I mean, this is expensive stuff, so I don't want to waste too much of it. And also, if I'm trying to grain match the two halves, the less wood I waste in the middle, the better. I'm losing a bit from the parting cut, and I'm losing a bit for either a spigot or a thread, whichever I choose. So it makes sense to try and minimize that loss. And I'm just going to push this in, and as I do, I'm just wiggling it slightly just to widen that groove. And also, I started off with the tool pretty much running on the bevel, and then perhaps if I switch to the side camera, you get a better view of this.
We don't get any view right now.
I just
In the way.
Okay,
above
now we're
the-
back.
Here we are.
That's better. So I'll start off with the tool. As I cut in, I bring the handle up to make it horizontal. So that's, as I'm going in, I'm making it more horizontal. How's that with both? So now I'm part way in. I'm almost horizontal with the tool, and I'm still wiggling it slightly just to widen that groove so it bites less. But also I'm going to take another cut, another half width of the tool or so, just to widen it, because I don't want this tool binding in that groove. We'll cut on in. And I'm just alternating the cut in the groove until I get close to the center. I'm down to less than 1/4 of an inch there now, probably not much more than 1/8. So I'll stop at that point. I don't want to go all the way through and have that slam shut on the tool. So I'll stop there, remove the piece of wood, and you can see there, let me just try and get the tool in, the wood in the right place.
There you go.
How much there is there. Not a huge amount, but it's enough to hold it together. There you go. There. There's just literally a bit more than 1/8. So at that point, I can just twist and break that. I'm turning the center away on both sides, so the damage doesn't matter. If it did matter, I'd saw it off. But yeah, you can just snap it off. So at that point, I can do that. So now I need to work on one or the other, and I'll start with the lid. I'll form the inside of the lid. So I now need to mount a chuck.
Well, he's changing chucks, folks. This is Paul Hannaby. He's out of United Kingdom, one of our members, and he does some great videos. Just check him up. It's Paul Hannaby Creative Woodcraft, Creative Wood Turning. Creative Wood Turning, and he's doing this demonstration for us.
I got it. Right, so I got my spigot in there, and that depth is pretty good. There's a gap between the bottom of the spigot and the bottom of the jaw, and that's exactly what I want, because I want the jaw, the top of the jaw, to run on this machined surface.
When you put it up there, you see the offset way down in there, folks. You see the little bit of gap. You're looking for that. And all
you
your
see there, when I've got that tightened, I've got about well, just over 1/8 of an inch gap, between 1/8 and 1/4 inch gap. And at that point, those jaws are forming a complete circle. So I've got maximum contact between the set of jaws and the spigot that I've cut. So it's good to get the sizing right on that. So this is the end of the box. In fact, I'm going to leave the end for now. I'm going to do the outside initially. I'm going for a fairly simple shape on this box, just a simple curve. So at this point, I'm thinking in my mind, how big do I want the hole in the box and the thread or the spigot, whichever it happens to be. In this case, I'm trying to produce a thread. So that's what's sort of almost in my mind. Where am I going to go with the actual dimensions of the hole? Because at this point, that's what I'm trying to form. So I'll cut a long enough. This is where I'm going to form my thread. So I want to cut a long enough section to form a decent thread. And then I'm thinking, what diameter do I want to go to? A bit more than that, maybe. Yeah, we'll go for that. So again, just form a square shoulder and a parallel cylinder to form my thread. And I've gone in, well, a good 1/4 of an inch distance wise to allow me plenty of space to form that thread. I'm just looking for a round scraper. If you don't want to get a gouge in there, you can always get your round scraper and form that radius with a half round scraper just to strike the thread. Okay, so that's the preparation for the thread. I also need to put in my recess. So again, I can come in here on the right up against the shoulder with this narrow parting tool. This is a 2mm parting tool, I think, and cut about a 1/16 of an inch or so depth of a recess, and then that's ready for me to form a thread. So I'll bring my speed back down 400 RPM ish. I'm going to go for an 18 teeth per inch thread, so slightly finer than the one I just did as the practice one. Just give me a bit more space between the rest and the wood. And we've got, yeah, it's about 450 RPM there. So I'm cutting pretty much on center height, start on that corner. The thread's starting to form. And this time I'm going slower because this should form me a one start thread. The spiral started to form. And with each cut, I'm bringing the tool around.
Oh, can you form left hand and right hand threads with the same tool?
Yes, just about. It's easier to do with the finer teeth than bigger ones. I did a demo a little while ago and I demonstrated how to do it. This piece I used earlier, let me just turn that off. This piece I used earlier, these two threads I just cut for the purposes of this demo are left-hand threads. The one on the end is a right-hand thread. And the difference between the two is you start off at the end of the thread and cut to the left if you want a left-hand thread, a right-hand thread, sorry. To cut a right-hand thread, you start on this end and you cut to the right. So you just go in the opposite direction with the tool. But as Eddie was saying earlier, there's a bit of a bias on the end of the teeth. So what I would do, switch to that camera. Normally, I would use the thread chaser there, pretty much on center, and you're going to get the front of the teeth engaging in those grooves. But to do a left-hand thread, what I'd do is I'd tip the tool up a bit and probably drop it a little bit. So you can see there, I've got less of the front of the teeth in contact with the wood.
Mm-hmm.
And that's on this sort of pitch, on a 16 or an 18, that works. And you can do a left-hand thread.
Because you eliminate the bevel.
Yeah, you're sort of working against the bevel in a way. So it doesn't make it easy for yourself, but it will work. I did try the same with a 10 teeth per inch thread chaser. and that bias has that much more of an effect. It was very difficult to do. I just about sort of did it, and it sort of worked, and then it didn't. And then with a coarser pitch thread chaser. So I'll continue with this one. The thread's about half formed, so I need to go deeper. Let me just switch back to my dual view. And what I want to do is cut until I've got fully formed teeth, but go no further. If you try to keep going beyond that point, you start to tear the tops of the threads. So you start making a mess of it. So I want to cut to the point where the teeth are fully formed and then stop. And I also want this thread to be a parallel thread. So I'm looking at where the tool is and checking my tool is pretty much at 90 degrees to the bed. So that means the end of that tool is presented parallel to the cylinder. So that should give me, hopefully, a parallel thread. That looks pretty close to being a full depth. I'm just going to get in closer. Just a slight flat on the top, so another pass or two. But at that point, I'm almost at my last cut. So what I want to do, if I can find it. Ah, there it is. Essential tool. So for the last couple of cuts, I've got some wax here. This is Renaissance wax, but whatever your chosen wax is, put a little bit on a toothbrush and just rub that into the thread. What I want to do here is lubricate the cut. So the last couple of cuts are going to be, hopefully, a better cut, a smoother cut.
I want to go on record. I want to go on record with Ronnie. I didn't do that to your toothbrush, Ronnie.
Yeah, use somebody else's toothbrush is my advice on that
That's
one.
right. Yes. Oh, that made a lot of difference.
So I'm getting shavings coming off it still, but you can see it's different. And I've sort of almost cut through the wax now, I think. So if I went any further than that, I'd lubricate it some more, I think. But I think that's pretty much fully formed. So at that point, I'll consider the thread complete. What I want to do is clean up this shoulder. I could have done that before I did the thread, but doesn't matter too much whether you do it before or after, as long as you do it, because that will be a finished part of the box. So I'll bring my speed back up now. I'm just going to use the side of my parting tool just to use it like a scraper on the side of that shoulder. So hopefully that'll give me a good sort of fine edge, because that's a difficult one to sand without getting your abrasive in and damaging the thread. So I'm just trying to do it with very light cuts, and it's not using the tip of the parting tool. I'm actually using the wing as my cutting edge. This one I find works particularly well with that, because when I sharpen this one, I run the wheel against that top bevel and against the bottom one, so I effectively sharpen this as well, so I can use that in the same way and just run the edge against the surface I'm trying to cut there. So they both work. Right, so that's my shoulder cut. I need to do the inside of the lid now. Remember, this is at this point when it's held in the chuck, you need to do all you need to do on the bottom of the lid. So I need to shape that, hollow it, do whatever I've got to do with it. So I've got a 3/8 inch spindle gouge here. and I've set my tool rest up, so I'm cutting pretty much on center. The other thing, let's do that first. I'll get my head of myself here. That thread is far too long. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pitches there, so I need to turn that lid 6 turns, 6 full turns to put it on the box. That's far too many. So what I want to do now is actually lose half of that. So I only need to turn it probably 3 times to get the lid on. So I'm just going to part away half of the thread. Okay, what I've also done now is created a sharp edge on the thread. So I'm just sort of guessing the angle of the edge of the thread, and I'm just beveling it. It's about, well, I think these are British with thread, so it's just under 60 degrees, 57 degrees or something like that. So I'm just taking that sharp front face off. So because if you leave that sharp edge, it literally sort of comes down to nothing, and it leaves a very sort of fragile edge that will get damaged. So removing that removes the chances of that happening. So that's my finished thread, and now I just need to do the inside of the end of the box. Just angle it down a little bit. So I'm not going to do anything too elaborate with this, just going to cut into the center, just to put a curved recess basically into the lid of this. And this is spindle orientation, so I should actually be cutting the other way. I'm cheating a little here, I'm cutting against the grain. But I know that I've got quite a dense wood here. I'm using this king wood. It's quite dense, so I'm cheating a little. What I should be doing is cutting center to edge instead of edge to center to cut with the grain. But I can do a few cuts and then use a scraper and cut it the proper way from center to edge. So that allows me to use the gouge to do the sort of remove the bulk of the waste. And I could finish it with this. This is a half round scraper, by the way, but as you can see, it's on a round bar. I quite like this for box work because you can angle it any way you want on the rest, and it's a really nice tool to put anywhere you want.
Who makes that scraper? Or did you make it, Paul? Hey, Paul?
Sorry?
Who makes that scraper? Or did you make it yourself?
I did.
Okay.
No, it was one that was something else. I can't remember what it was. It was a quadrant tool or something like that, I think they call it. But I ground that myself. But all I did was ground the end till I was half thickness, and then just put a fingernail grind on it. So that's a homemade tool. But yeah, it came as an off-the-shelf tool. It was a crown tool, I believe. But I just reground the tip because I wanted that instead of what it was sold as. Another one that I find quite useful.
Would you call that a scoochie? Would you call that a scoochie gouge?
It's very similar to that, yes.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah. When I made that many years ago, I'd never heard of a scoochie gouge, but since then I saw one. I thought, oh, that's very similar to what I've got. But yes, it is very similar to that. It might not be the same, but it's certainly similar. This is another one I quite like with box making. It's got this cutout for undercutting the rim on the box, and I'll probably use that one and hollow in the bottom, but it's also got a nice wide curve on the end. So it's a good tool for sort of cleaning the center and finishing cuts on this. I'm just going to move my rest a little. Nope, don't want to do that. I'm just going to raise the rest. It's grabbing because I think I just had the handle too low. But if I trail it slightly, it should cut without grabbing. Better. So I'll just turn that center to make sure I get rid of any of those marks I might have created when it grabbed. And then draw it up the side. And a tip, if you're not sure on finding the center, if you put the tool where the center is and just lift the handle up and down a little bit, just wiggle it up and down, then you'll remove any little pimple that might be there. So that's the inside, hopefully done. Just a tiny mark there, so I'm just going to take another cut to get rid of that. Oh, it's even worse than the first one. That's better. So that's the inside done. I just need to sand that. I'm not going to put any sealer on that. I'm just going to sand it as is and wax it. For the outside of the box, I'll probably put sealer on, but not the inside. Just drop the speed down a bit as well. I don't want to overcook this and put heat into the wood that might cause that surface checking that can sometimes happen. I mean, it's quite a dense wood, and they seem to be quite often susceptible to that surface heat checks. If you put too much heat into it at the sanding stage, and I'm just going to sand the end of that as well. I've started off with a 180 grit here. Being a fairly dense wood, all being well, I should get a good enough cut to be able to do that. Now I'm on 240. And as with any of these sort of sanding processes, what I'm trying to do with that first grit is to remove any tool marks, tool grain, bumps, ridges, etc. And then the subsequent grits just take out the scratches left by the previous abrasive. So, and here I'm using a 2-inch wide cloth abrasive. I'm folding it in half just to get a narrower section, folding it in half long way. So I'm using effectively an 1-inch wide strip. Yeah, I get less catches when I'm not turning at 2 AM. Right, that's 320, and I'll go down to 400 with this. And again, folding that in half. I tend to use the 2-inch stuff for most of what I do, I suppose, and I think it's just a comfortable sort of width to work with. Seems to work. when I used to buy 4-inch stuff, I used to tear it in half anyway. So in the end, I thought, why don't I just do it the easy way and buy the 2-inch? And I'm just gonna, with the last grit going on that shoulder, and just give it a quick sort of touch against that. If I did the right thing with the parting tool, it should be fairly cleanly cut, so it shouldn't need too much. So at that stage, I've still got a bit of wax left on my toothbrush here, so I'll use that to put a bit of wax onto that. And then buff that. This is well, they call it safety cloth, but it's paper really. This stuff just tears rather than causing any problems if it was to catch on the chuck or anything like that. So much safer than using a woven cloth. So that's the inside of the box done.
What's the wax mixed with? Mineral oil?
Pardon?
What's the wax mixed with? Do you mix it with mineral oil?
No, it's just out of the tin, Renaissance wax.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Just off the shelf product.
Yeah.
So that's the inside. There you go. See that? So on to the other half of the box now. And I'll mount that in the chuck in exactly the same way. You'll notice when I put it in the chuck, I'm just pushing the center of the blank rather than holding it and risking it rocking. If I just push the center against the jaws of the chuck, it should seat itself correctly. And that should be running true. Well, as true as it's going to be. There's never a guarantee, is there? So, the outside needs a little bit turning away, but I'm not worried about that at this stage. What I want to do is clean off this front face and then work on the hollowing. So to clean that front face off, I'm being quite a dense wood. I could actually use a scraper on this, but I'll go for a spindle gouge anyway. Either would work. Just want to drop the rest slightly. Cut that all the way to the center, and I can even use my switch to the other camera. I can even use my spindle gouge with the flute pointing at my left shoulder, so about 10 o'clock, as a scraper. So I'm using that left wing to give me a scraping cut, and if I lower the handle, I get more of a shearing cut as well. So so I can take just on the outer edge, take a couple of finer cuts just to smooth that a bit. I'm just going to remove my tail stock, because this being the short bed lathe, it does get in the way sometimes. So when I'm hollowing, it doesn't give me an awful lot of room with that there. So I'll move that out of the way. I'll just bring my rest up just a little. What I'm aiming for here is to get my gouge exactly on center when I hold it horizontally, because I'm just going to use the gouge to effectively drill the hole. Nearly there. There. So that's pretty much on. I can just push that straight in. That one's just left a little dimple, so I'm just going to cut that away. Again with my flute pointing at 10 o'clock. And then once I've cleaned that away, I can push it in and drill. Let's have the other camera. There you go. So I'm just using that to drill a start hole basically. And I'm just gauging the depth against the side. I'm putting my thumb where I want to stop. So I'll drill in a bit. When my thumb reaches the rest, I know I've gone deep enough. So that's deep enough. So that's the initial hole, and I can turn my gouge over and use it as a hollowing tool now and cut from center to edge with my flute at about 10 o'clock. So that's one way of hollowing. I could also use this half range scraper. That's quite a good hollowing tool. Use it in exactly the same way, but just angle the not the bevel, but angle the tool so it's just the flat is pointing at about 11 o'clock now. So if I want to make that less aggressive, I angle it more more anti-clockwise, and if I want to make it more aggressive, I turn it a little bit more clockwise. So that's another option. With something this size, you obviously wouldn't want any sort of big hollowing tool, but the gouge is probably the favorite here. On a deeper box or a square bottom box, I might use this tool. Let's go to that camera. This one is a square scraper, square on the end, but again made out of a round bar, and again a homemade one. This one, I've also got a cutting edge on the side, and that's not quite square on the end. It's got a slight angle on it, and it's about 90 degrees to this, or just under 90 degrees. So I can cut straight in with it as a hollowing tool, and I can also cut sideways with it. So if I'm cutting a square bottom box, that's a really good tool to use for that. In this case, I'm making a rounded bottom box, so I'll stick with my gouge for the time being. What I've got to bear in mind is not to make that hole bigger than my thread. So if I just get my dividers here, and I'll set that to just a little bit smaller than the thread, so I'm allowing myself a little bit of leeway, and I can hold that up there and just see how far away I am, and I can come a little bit wider. What I'll probably do with this box is to undercut the thread at the back. So I'm just going to roughly hollow this out initially. Let's just get the size on that. A little bit more to go. But what I'm going to do now, because I want to make a parallel straight spigot, I'm going to use this square scraper with a cutter on the side to cut the side of this box. And again, just check with my dividers, see where I am. Yeah, I've got a little bit more to go. You can see now I'm actually pulling the tool toward my left hand and cutting sideways with it, cutting outwards from the spindle there. Check it again. Yeah, I'm about there with the dividers. So that's as far as I want to go. So I just want to put that back in there. Just try and get that as parallel as I can. Because I'm trying to make effectively two parallel cylinders that are going to sort of join together when you put the two halves of the box together. So it's important that that is parallel. And to check it, I've got here a set of internal calipers that I can set up to the bottom of that and slide it up and down and see if I've got roughly the same pressure as I go up and down. You soon get a feel for whether it's sort of getting looser at one end or the other, and it is slightly, so I think there's a slight taper on that.
Paul, your main goal is to make the opening in the bottom the same size or just slightly under the size of the threads?
Yeah, I'm cutting this under the size of the threads, yeah. So when I form the thread initially, the thread will be undersized. So I'll then size the thread to fit. The question earlier about do I do the external or internal thread first? I prefer to do it the other way, but in this instance, I went for the external thread, and then I'll be sizing the internal thread to fit it. So you start off with a slightly undersized hole, so it's going to be too tight, too small, and then I open it up till it fits. That's the plan. So I'm just checking with my dividers, my calipers, and that's still got, seems to have a very slight taper on it. So just take another cut there. That seems better. Another way you can check that is if you find something like a small ruler, anything that you know is straight, a ruler's obvious choice, but what I'm going to do is put that in their hole and push it against the edge of the hole. Wiggle it till it looks right, and then I'm going to look down from above and see if the edge of that ruler is parallel to my bed bars. If it is, then there's a very good chance that that cylinder, that hole is parallel. If it doesn't look quite parallel to the bed bars, then it's got a slight taper on it, and I think that's still got a slight taper. So take another slight cut from the bottom of the hole. Hopefully that should do it. You could do this with a twist drill or something like that. Anything that you know is straight, as a straight piece of steel rod, anything like that. But just make sure it's seated against the edge of that hole as far on as you can get it, and look along the edge of the ruler against the edge of the bed bars, and I think now that's parallel. So that's ready to take a thread. What I need to do is just get rid of some of that additional material in the hole. So I'm going to switch to my half range scraper again and just open up the bottom of the box a little more. But I'm just cutting up to the shoulder where I've prepared for the thread. I'm not cutting into that parallel bit that I've just created. That's okay. So at this stage, I need to make that recess for my internal thread to have a run out. So I've got my recess tool, and where I use that is it goes in the hole. I'll do it on top of the wood, but it goes in the hole, and then you can see there's a length that you leave for the thread, and then you cut the groove. And the idea of that groove is so you run into the groove before you bottom out into the box. There's a remnant of a pencil line there where I've used this in the past, so that's probably not a bad place to aim for with this. So I'll just bring my rest in a bit. I want, again, cutting with this at about center height. So I'm looking at the pencil line on the top of the tool to be on the edge of the hole, and that will give me a long enough thread for me to work with. I'll probably again reduce the length of that afterwards, but as before, it helps to have a slightly longer thread to work with. So I just want to cut that in again to a depth of about 1/16 of an inch or so. That's about deep enough. And I also need that radius on the front corner. So to start the thread. So back to my half round scraper, just radius that front corner, and that should be prepared to start a thread. So I want to move my rest back a bit, give me a bit of space, drop the rest to allow for the thickness of the tool. And now I'm going to use the other thread chaser to do the internal thread, and again start at about 45 degrees, push in. So I start on the outside and push inwards, and then back out and then back in. So now I'm forming effectively setting up a movement that's a bit like a clockwise circle. So I go in, forward, back round. Yes?
Can you move the camera a little bit to the right so we can see the opening of the box?
Probably better with that one, is it? Hang on, where's that gone? One of my cameras just died. Hang on a sec.
Camera either died or you need to add a lot of light.
Mighty dark inside that box.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's pretty deep, Ronnie.
Get this camera back up.
I guess I got what I asked for.
You can't move the camera to the right, push the lathe to the left.
There you go.
Pays 11. Just me, or has nobody seen anything either?
No, we're not seeing anything, but he's working.
Okay. Just making sure, because I had issues with my Wi-Fi again. Had to plug in network cables.
There we go.
There we go.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get the other one working. It's for some reason decided not to work.
Right, we're watching Paul Hannaby out of the United Kingdom turn this box with a threaded lid. He's threaded the top already. Now we're creating the bottom, and he's giving us a lot of detail on how to conform, how to make them work out. Match is the thing. If they don't match, they don't work. You're tuned into worldwidewoodturners.org, and we meet every Wednesday evening like this. And we've got about 100 people tuned in tonight and visiting with us. And we need your input. You got input, you can give it to us. You got questions, you can ask them. You got problems, well, we can't fix them, but we'll give you some ideas. But we've got a challenge going right now. And the challenge starts real soon, but you can do it now. It's to make a wig stand. And Ronnie has made 10 today because he wants to get way out in front of this challenge. But he's challenging you and your wood turning club, you and your club, your friend members, to turn wig stands. When you do, let our master website master, our master webmaster, know that you've turned them, and he'll have a page on our website, or worldwidewoodturners.org, which will have those names and who they've turned. And if you send photographs, we'd love to see the work. We'd love to see the work. I'm going to pull the spotlight off of there we go. Now he may be back with us.
Yeah, I'm having trouble getting this side camera back up. I don't know why. Just decided to stop. Oh, I see. Leads come out.
It's unplugged.
I've got an extension lead on it, and that had become disconnected, which didn't help. Better? Right, so that's the one it should be on. Do you need more light on that? Probably do, don't you? Let's see if I can put another light over there.
Paul,
Yeah, being
what
a
kind of
dark wood.
cameras do you use?
Sorry?
Are you using webcams or other type
Yeah,
of
they
cameras?
are. Yeah, USB webcams. Right then. What can
Yeah,
we?
the other thing, it's 2:30 in the morning over there. We appreciate it, Paul.
That's okay.
You know, Martin didn't make it tonight. Martin went out of country, out of his country. We haven't
I'm
seen
looking at
Martin.
this right now. We have a better picture tonight than what we had Saturday on a local club meeting. This is a great picture.
Right, so hopefully that's enough light to see what's going on. And
Now we got it. We're cooking now.
Yeah,
Paul, I just picked up another good idea from you too, looking at your outboard banjo and the light mount you've got in it.
yeah, it's that was actually, this lathe used to belong to Ray Key, and that was something that Ray made. He would use as I said, it's a short bed one way, and on the outboard end is a bed extension, a 17-inch bed extension, and he would use that predominantly as where he worked. He would turn bowls on it, and that little bracket on the light, you can see there the bottom of the angle poise lamp, was on the inboard banjo, because he would predominantly work on the outboard, but I've switched them round, so you can do it either way. But yeah, it's
that's a great idea.
That's quite a neat idea.
I may have to incorporate that.
Slacken that off, pull this out, you see it's just a piece of wood with a spigot on it, and the light screwed onto it. Let me just go and grab that piece of wood. Got it. So yeah, that just sits in the banjo there, and then you put your angle poise light in there.
I love it.
But yeah, that was Ray's idea, not mine. But it came with the lathe, so yeah, very useful.
We have the shoulder made, we have it undercut, and now we're going to start placing some threads, correct?
Yeah. So we've got, let me just move that camera so you can see the important bit. That's better. Good. Right, so I've got my internal chaser to start chasing this thread. Again, drop my speed down to about 400, 450. And I'll start cutting this at 45 degrees. So I'll push forward. I think I'm slightly low with the rest. It doesn't feel like it's biting, so I just need to, that's better. I'm keeping the tool flat on the rest here. That isn't quite biting, so I'm just raising the rest slightly. There we are, 450. Yeah, that's about right on the speed. It's not taking yet. I can't feel it sort of pulling itself in. I don't know if it's me just pulling it too fast. I'm just going to clean that off and start again. It doesn't feel right. So I'll just re-radius that front corner back down to 450 RPM, and the other thing, if in doubt, sharpen the tool. So I'm doing exactly that. Okay, that's all right.
Keep in mind, folks, you sharpen it up because this cuts with that edge just like a scraper. You get what I'm saying? Okay.
This time it seems to have struck. So I'm gradually bringing my tool around. So I'm cutting into the hole. To try and get myself a parallel thread. I'm convinced that's going right. I've got a spiral there, but I'm just on my doubts that it's actually right. I'm just going to do my pencil trick just to check this. Yeah, as I thought, that's a two-start thread, so I'm going too fast there. So I'm just going to turn that away. Again, one of the benefits of starting small, it gives you a little bit of leeway. If you get it wrong the first time, you can turn that away, and then you've still got enough left to recover it. So I've got my radius on the front corner. I've just left a little bit of a corner there, so knock that off. Speed down to 450, and this time a little bit slower with the tool. So as before, I want to cut to the full depth of the form of the teeth. Or virtually to the full depth, should I say. So about there, let's stop there, just brush some of that dust out. So that should be too small, and it is. So what I need to do is enlarge that, and the way to do that is to go back to the flat scraper, and I'll as I said earlier, if you keep turning with the thread chasing tool, once you've got a fully formed teeth, you start to crumble the tops of the teeth. So it's not a good idea just to keep going with that until you get to the size you want. What you want to do at this stage is go back up to turning speed. Use a flat scraper or a gouge or whatever you want. Just turn half the teeth away. Take the tops off the teeth, but leave enough so you've got something to lead the tool. And then we cut it to the full depth again. So we're sort of creeping up on the right size by recutting the teeth, the thread here. And then let's have another look. looks like it's about full depth again. So again, we can bring this up and check, and we're still too small. So same again. Speed it up. Take half the teeth away. Drop the speed back down. About 450-ish. And then we'll have another go. This is, I think I probably started off pretty small here, so I've got a ways to go to get to where I want. But as I said earlier, if you allow yourself a good margin, if you do mess up the thread on the first attempt, you can cut it away as I did, and then go for it again. So this is going to take a few goes to sort of cut it to get out to the diameter I want to be at. But the other benefit of doing it this way and allowing a bit of a margin there is that radius I cut on the front, I'm basically removing that as I go. So the radius is no longer needed. So so by doing it this way, you lose that entire radius. Yeah, I was probably a little bit overcautious with that. I went considerably undersized, really.
Well, it's really a hard thing to put it back.
I think I've also reached the point here where I've basically cut away that recess that I've formed. So what I ideally now want to do is to cut that recess at the back a little bit deeper to give me that run out again. So let me find my recess tool. Bring that speed up. Take that to the back of the hole. Cut that a couple of millimeters deep again. And we need to widen it some more, so I'm going to take a little bit more thread off. And then recut. I just need to move my rest out a little bit. We're getting closer, but more to go. if the full height of this thread is about 1/16 of an inch, which probably isn't far off, then if I'm cutting half of that away each time I do this, I'm enlarging it by a 30-second at a time, aren't I? So just to give you a sort of rough idea of the sort of sizes that we're working with.
With my threading tools, the internal threads are 55 thousandths deep and the externals are 38 thousandths.
Sorry?
The thread depth for the tools that I have, the internal threads are 55 thousandths deep and the externals are 38 thousandths.
Okay. And what pitch are they?
16.
Okay, yeah. So they probably won't be far off what these are. These are 18 I'm using at the moment, but won't be a huge difference. Now I'm just working on the sort of the rough assumption that the thread form is an equilateral triangle. It isn't quite, but if it was, the width would be not far off what the height is, but I know it doesn't quite work like that, does it? But we're not too far out. Right, we still under. I've lost my recess again, so I'll get my recess tool back in. There's half the thread. Right, we're just getting to the point where it's taking, but it's too tight. So I'm just going to check the thread, and I think I could probably just do another couple of cuts without opening that out. But what I will do is as I'm getting very close, is just to put a bit of wax on it, as I did with the external thread. Yeah, I've yet to find anything better than a toothbrush for doing that. This seems to be the ideal tool for the job there.
Especially somebody else's.
Sorry?
Especially somebody else's toothbrush.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
That might be a reason woodturners don't do away retreats together, you know? It's keep an eye on your stuff. Looks enough.
Right, so try that again.
Yeah, there we go.
So it's going in, but it's just too tight. So I know I've got to take a bit more off. And again, I think it's still slightly flat at the tops of the teeth. So
That binding will also happen if one or the other is not truly parallel to the axis.
yeah, hopefully it is. But as I'm cutting, yeah, that's going in now. There we go. I think that's still just a tad on the tight side, but I'm not going to cut any more yet. I'm just going to put some wax in it. Give it a bit of lubrication. Put that back in. It's very easy just to overshoot and take off too much, and then you've got two threads that are just a little bit loose. I'll show you one of those in a minute. That's going in so far, and then it's going tight, so either that thread isn't quite parallel or there's something else wrong, but I think it's possibly that. It seems to go in the first couple of turns quite well, so I'll just adjust my angle of the tool slightly. Cut deeper farther in. That's gone farther, but at that point it's very tight.
It's not bottoming out. No, it's not bottoming.
No, I was just checking the length of that, and it shouldn't be bottoming out. No, I think it's I need to cut that recess at the bottom, that's for sure. So I'll do that again just to make sure that that's not causing me the problem.
See, Ronnie, that's the way to really remove the dust, right there.
No, I always tell people not to do that.
Ronnie wants me to buy a broom.
Yeah, what I do is keep this brush on my lathe all the time. So I should put that in there and turn it. So that's what I normally do. Tonight I'm getting into bad habits. But yeah, I shouldn't be doing that. I always say you shouldn't blow it out, because by doing so you're getting your face close to where the dust is. And so you're blowing some of that dust back in your face. I'm just going to take the tops off these threads. A couple of turns there. And then slow it down. Back in with the wax on the toothbrush there. I'll just do another couple of passes with the tool. Just cut that thread a little bit deeper.
Just one more cut.
Yeah.
One more. That's all. Just one more.
I'll do it right this time. I'll use the brush.
Those famous last words. Just one last pass.
Yeah.
So Paul, you didn't explain why you should be blowing the dust around.
Sorry?
You didn't explain why you shouldn't be blowing dust around, because
well,
you
to get your face close enough to blow the dust, you're in the firing line when it starts coming back out, aren't you?
Yeah.
So you don't close your eyes.
Back in your face. So you could inhale some of it, you get it in your eye either. But that's going all the way now, all the way down. What I haven't got is grain alignment. That's still a little bit on the tight side, so I'm just going to do another cut just to ease that. So more wax. The one thing I like about this Kingwood is it has actually cut very nicely. So some woods tend to crumble and the threads are a little bit fiddly, but this is a really nice cut on the thread. So yeah, it's a good choice of wood. I think a lot of the rosewoods are potentially good for cutting threads on. All right, just take a little bit off. That's better.
That's nice fit.
Right at the end, it tightens up a little bit, but what I'm going to do is actually shorten that thread anyway, so potentially that shouldn't be a problem. Right, so that's the thread formed. Just run that in there again, see how it goes the second time. As I said, we haven't got grain alignment. I'm going to spin this back until we have. I think that probably matches that one. It's there. So that's where the grain alignment should be. So to make that easier for myself, I'm going to find my white pencil.
Can you pop to the overhead camera?
Yeah, sorry.
Now we got it.
There you go. Right, so I've got the grain alignment, but to make it visually easier for myself, I just put a pencil line there. So that's what I'm working with. So I can figure out how far off I am from being perfectly aligned. It's only less than a quarter of a turn to get those lines matched. So what I need to do is to allow that lid to spin that extra 1/6 of a turn, let's say. I need to remove some wood. And I can do it in one or two places. I can either take it off the shoulder on the lid, but I've taken this out of the chuck and it's off the lathe, etc. So the obvious place is to take it off the face of the bottom of the box here. Let me switch to the side camera again. So where my finger is on this rim, that's where I need to take some wood away. And a 1/6 of a turn, remember we've got 18 teeth per inch thread chaser. So 18 turns, it gives me an inch. So one turn is an 1/18 of an inch. So let's talk in strange numbers here. So an 1/18 of an inch, and a 1/6 of a turn is a 1/6 of that. So let's go back to millimeters. An 1/18 of an inch is about 1.5 millimeters. A 1/6 of that is what, a 1/4 of a millimeter or so. So whatever that is in inches. But yeah, a couple of passes is what we're talking. Very light cut, 1/4 of a millimeter or so. So I'll take my speed up. Again, I can use my spindle gauge as a scraper. I've got my flute angled over.
Hey, Jeff, tell him that it's easy to take it off. It's hard to put it back on.
Exactly, yes. So we'll put this back on and see where we are now.
Reverse is for?
So we're a bit closer. So whatever I just did, I've got to do about the same again. And you saw how much I took off there. Wasn't a huge amount.
One last cut, Jeff. One last cut.
Yeah, if I overshoot, the answer then is to take off a full turn. So then it becomes almost a 1/16 of an inch to remove. Not that that's a problem, but I'll try not to overshoot. How's that? I think by the time I've sanded that, that'll line up.
That's pretty good.
So I mean, it also depends on how tight you actually do it up. I don't want to have to really crank it up, but you see that is if I do it hard enough, it aligns. But I wouldn't normally do it that hard. So I'm not going to cut any more off that. We'll go with that. So now what we've got to do is
Paul, I'm sorry to say this, I have to call time on you.
Okay.
Folks, we got to get back to Paul and complete this one day. We hold on to it, Paul, and we can finish it up.
Yeah, either that or I'll finish it and I'll show it at the next meeting.
Okay, that'll work for us.
I mean, I've got another one here that's sort of at the same stage. So if you want to have a continuation of this and doing the rest of the box, but from here on in, it's basically turning an ordinary box, if you want to call it that. The thread chasing bit is the fiddly bit, if you like. But yeah, from there I mean, here's the one I said I did earlier. It's turned, it's got a thread, it needs the bottom hollowing out properly, and then the outside of that box can be shaped. But yeah, eventually that will look something like one of these, perhaps. That's what it's
That's
destined to
nice.
be. But I find it's best to do the inside of the box first. You hollow it, you cut the threads, etc. You get the 2 halves fitted, and then finish it. But just before we do wind up, what I can do now with that base still in the chuck, what I can do here is to put my lid on, and then I can shape and finish the lid with it on the base of the box. So I only needed to do the inside of the box initially. So you see what I mean? So now I can remove the chuck spigot off the end here. So I can turn that away, and I can shape the lid and then shape the rest of the box. So I can finish it from there with that without taking that half out of the chuck.
So your
That's
jam
long
chuck
like-
is,
Yeah, and then all I need to do is jam chuck the base of the box somehow. I can make a stub with a matching thread to screw the bottom half of the box on. So that's one way of doing it.
that's a great demo, Paul. Real appreciate you walking us through threads. Brenda just said she enjoyed it, but she doesn't understand, didn't plan on doing threads. A lot of folks don't, and my friend Ron Brown has got a product out that is inserts that are inserts that have male and female, and they're made out of wood. So if you're not into making threads, you can add threads. But there's also some commercially made metal inserts that do that, and Lee Valley Veritas used to sell them. And I had them in 2 or 3 sizes. They make a nice addition to a beautiful piece of wood. And when you get the grain match, if you do the right texture on the outside and right finish and right way to handle that joint, you don't see the joint. It's just gone.
Hmm.
Well, Paul, again,
Yeah,
thank
but,
you, sir.
One idea with thread inserts, I've never done it myself, but somebody else mentioned some of the plumbing fittings you can buy. You can just cut the thread off and use that as a thread insert. So you get the 2 halves of the plumbing fitting, just cut the thread part off and set that into your box. So,
And
that's another way of doing it.
yeah, well, I saw one that an urn was done with the PVC parts like that.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, if you're doing it with the PVC pipes, you really need to use electrical conduit instead of water pipe. The electrical conduit fittings are straight threaded where the pipe threadings are tapered. So the gray PVC electrical conduit is straight and it works much better. But I
Good.
like the way Paul did it. Thank you very much, Paul. That was a great demo.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul.
Well, yep, Paul came to help us tonight. And we have other wood turners that get involved with us. Again, Paul, thank you, Paul. We will be back in touch with you, and we'll look forward to seeing that piece. That is really nice.